few minutes to see some familiar faces. In a few minutes, I'll have the great pleasure of introducing Chris Vian from the White House, who is here to share some of his thoughts. And I thought I'd just give you an overview of what we'll do first this morning. So, I will offer a couple of framing remarks about government innovation, which we'll start in a second. You'll see there's a quiz question I'm going to come back to. That'll take just a couple of minutes. Then Chris and I are going to come on stage and have a conversation. I'll ask him some questions, and we hope they might be some questions you think a White House official doesn't normally get asked in sessions like this, so hopefully it'll be interesting. He has said he might ask me some questions back. It's unscripted, so anything could happen. Hopefully anything won't happen, but we'll see where it goes. And then we'll move on to the next session with Pat and Bruce. So, I'm going to start with a question I'm going to ask for a show of hands. I'll give you some choices as how to use those hands in a second. So, in which country in the world can you get a marriage license, file divorce papers, receive a passport, register a business in the same place, each in under 20 minutes, without touching a piece of paper? I can tell you, it is not where I live. All right, so here are some choices. Norway, the Philippines, Georgia, the UK, and Costa Rica. If you had my American geographical education, you might have had to study those flags for a second. So I'd like to show of hands. So how many people think that country is Norway? All right, my Scandinavian presence. How about the Philippines? Okay, Georgia? Okay, the UK? Yeah, nobody thinks that. Costa Rica. Okay, so the answer is actually Georgia, where if you read and trust the New York Times recently, creating a number of public service halls, which are places where you can have 250 services in one place. It looks a little bit like IKEA. They greet you. They route you at the beginning to a number of different desks. And they are building cities. They're trying to build a whole city around one of these halls, and you can read that in the New York Times. Anyway, I offer that as a warm-up. I'm going to move this down in case that helps. All right, a little fuzzy. I offer that really as a warm-up because many of you may be thinking, my gosh, is it me? Or is innovation something that I keep hearing over and over and over again? And if you thought that, you would actually be right. So we did a little bit of analysis, and we said to ourselves, is it true that people are talking about innovation more than we thought? We looked at the number of Google searches that are actually done on the word innovation, and you might be surprised to discover that 300% a year from 2008 to 2011 on the word innovation. It's about 60% for government innovation. There are going to be a couple of you out there who will say, yeah, but what is it for everybody? Isn't it just going up? That number's 12. So it's a big number. So people all around the world are asking this question, gosh, what does it mean to be innovative? Why do we care? So on the next section here, I think you spoke a lot this morning about the imperative for innovation. I think each of the speakers touched on that in some form. Why is it important right now for governments everywhere to do more and to do better with less? We've identified a number of trends. I'm not going to march through all of them, but I will give you a couple of fun facts just to help us start this conversation. So first, we talk about new technology and increased connectivity. It's a little bit hard for me to get around this, but if you think about it, there are 30 billion pieces of content shared on Facebook every month. So if you were to give 1 second to each of those, it would take you 950 years just for this month's content. Why does that matter? Well, I think it matters because it's actually changing the expectations of government. There's a study that shows that 80+%, I think it's 82% of Americans who are online have actually gone to a government website to use some service or to read government content. So the expectations that are actually shaped by what people are experiencing in the private sector are coming to government, and they're coming faster than many people imagine. I think there are other reasons why government is seeing a need to do more and better with less. Certainly, we all talk about the aging of the population. In the next 30 years, we'll see more than 50% of the population will be over 65, where that growth is going up. Excuse me. I would also say that the dependency ratio, so if you think of how many people that an American worker has to carry in order to pay for social benefits, that will double in this same time period. So governments are being asked to do more and more, and the environment is increasingly challenging. So, I mean, you all know what the government itself has looked like, but even if you just map out the number of agencies and corporations, which I think is in many ways responding to a real need people have perceived for specialization. So it's responding for a way to give better service. But that's created pretty unusual challenges for collaboration and efficiency if you look at the number of agencies at any given time that people have to work with. And what I would say is, it's an environment where people don't have that much money to spend. So if you think about kind of the budget deficits all around the world, it's going to reach about $4 trillion. I think it hit that in 2011. So the U.S. looks a little bit better at that than most developed countries. We're the kind of second line from the top. But the real point is, if you put $1 trillion in dollar bills and stack them up, you'd basically reach the moon. So it's a lot, and it's putting a drain on most global governments. So does innovation matter? Now, in the private sector, you would say there are some pretty clear reasons to believe that innovation matters. So I'll show you what's here. This is just a growth rate for companies, and I know there are some limits to the relationship, of course, of analysis in the private sector to the public sector, but just come with me for a minute. The average growth, if you look at the time since 2000, where, of course, we had a couple of economic challenges, seems to be a reasonably flat line in that 5% range. That's on average. If you look at the top innovators, there was a faster decline, and we can ask ourselves how much of that was related to innovation carrying more risk. There was a faster decline, but then there was a faster and steeper recovery. And throughout this period, those companies that innovate tend to do better than those who don't. Now, no surprise, governments around the world are figuring this out. I'm not going to go through all the examples that are going to come up here. But essentially, there are lots of examples around the world where governments are spending money on innovation and discovering that allows them to save in the long run, to get better service, to increase revenue they need to fund important operations of the government. If we organize all of these things that's happening in the world, I would just leave you in these opening remarks with kind of 3 things to keep in mind. There are 3 trends that I would say seem to be coming to the fore the most at this time period. First is, how do we bring people in? You heard that in the video. How do we get much better ideas and priorities from people? So it increases complexity, but how do we get better information in? That looks in a number of different ways. In Austria, you can see lawmaking. You can see places where people are participating in the actual budgeting of government. That really started in Brazil about 10 years ago and has extended to some cities in the US and other places around the world. A classic example of something that's really interesting and new here is in Indonesia, where they have a system through text messaging where citizens can provide information directly to the Situation Room of the president. So when they're trying to figure out, we're dealing with an issue around deforestation, we're hearing one thing from our ministry, we're hearing another thing from the press, what's going on? They can send a message out to all the people because they know by cell phone records who's roughly where, and they can get information, text, camera phone, etc., straight back. It gets tagged to make sure it's coming from who it says it's coming from, and they can use that information in real time. I find that really amazing. A second series of trends is really about the simplification of government services. Certainly the one-stop shop is a kind of flavor of the month on this, but it's something that seems to be really important. You've got 70-plus agencies in a government. How do you make it so that everybody doesn't have to go to 70 different buildings every time you want something? That happens in a number of ways. In Canada, it's brick and mortar. They've got 300-plus locations where people can come to get service. Places like Australia, they put them on trucks, so they have mobile one-stop shops. Another example would be in Estonia, where they have used an e-identity. So they assign essentially a digital identity for every person. They use that both for public and private sector services. So you can use it for parking, you can use it for banking, you can use it for digital signatures. I think there are 80,000 digital signatures a month, something like that in Estonia. And then finally, just a creative sharing of responsibility with other parties. So you hear about that in the private sector around kind of open innovation networks. This is thinking about ways that you can actually use the public to help provide themselves with better service. So for example, sometimes that's in passive ways. In Denmark, they can actually collect information from road bikes, so they actually know lots of things about kind of city usage patterns. In Brazil, it's more active. They publish their data every single day of government spending. So anything you use on a government credit card gets published online, and citizens have come and created applications that allow you to test what's really happening, and as a result, they've had some very large public firings of officials who were misusing money. and they've been able to improve kind of the overall level of integrity to the government. So, just with that in mind, if you think about these three trends, I actually want to bring us right to the conversation with Chris. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Chris. So Chris Vian is the Deputy United States Chief Technology Officer for Government Innovation. And probably some things that you do know about him if you've read his bio are that he has a very large portfolio around government innovation, kind of stimulating the ecosystem around government innovation, testing the most important ideas, figuring out how to showcase them and bring the necessary partnerships together. You probably also know that he, until recently, was the CIO in San Francisco and has had many, many government positions both in San Francisco and in the United States here at federal level, where he has used those many different experiences to inform how he thinks about innovation. You probably don't know that he has served 4 presidents, 2 Republican and 2 Democrat, probably like many of you here in the room. And you probably also don't know something that was interesting to me, that he lives in California in a geodesic dome. Not all of you may know what a geodesic dome was. I looked it up. It turns out that a geodesic dome is Epcot Center. So Chris claims he doesn't live in Epcot Center. We tried to paste his picture onto Epcot Center so that we could convince you that he does, but he actually doesn't. He lives in a geodesic dome in San Francisco. He brings the kind of substance of where he lives in innovative fashion to the work he does every day, and I'd like to welcome Chris to join me up here. Thanks for coming. Thank you for joining.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, Chris.
Yes.
It's an election year.
Yes.
A lot of people are going to say, election year, let's get ourselves till January, we can start big things. We'll think big ideas later, let's just wait for the administration to turn or not turn, but something will happen and that'll be the time to start new things. I sense from you that you don't believe that.
You're right.
Okay, so we have a lot of people here in the room that are going to make change happen, regardless of the administration that's here, with the help of the administration that's here. They might be wanting to wait. You think they should start now? What's one thing that everybody here in this room can do right now to help promote innovation, even in a year that feels like this one?
Well, I think, excellent question.
Thanks.
I think that based on my experience with transitioning presidents in and out of office, and let me just start there, if I may.
Please.
So I started my career in the White House. I was very lucky. I started off as the chief financial officer of the White House and moved into becoming the administrative officer. Started at the end of the Reagan administration, did all of Bush 1 and part of Clinton. And at that time, there were a group of us that were, by tradition, non-political. So we stayed from administration to administration, actually transitioning incoming presidents in and outgoing out. And it was a very interesting and very touchy position to be in, because you were trying to convince the people, the president you worked for, that you were loyal to that president, but at the same time, you were trying to convince the incoming administration that you could be supportive of them and their new direction and their policies. And so you had to really balance both being loyal but also being, we didn't use the word then, but innovative moving forward. And I will tell you, based on that experience, that it was always absolutely necessary to be able to talk about things that you had started and that you had some experience with, maybe not completed, but that you had started and that you could take into the new administration to actually show your worth, to really show that you knew what you're doing and that you could really create new and value-added products and services. So, I mean, based on my experience, and other people's experience may be different, it was absolutely essential to my survival, if you will, as I moved from administration to administration, position to position, to have had a track record of proposing new ideas. Some worked, some didn't, but actually moving them forward and showing that I was a value-added person and that I should be listened to, if not kept, in my position. So that would be the first answer to that. The second is that, what should everybody do? I mean, that's kind of a hard question to answer because it's really specific into each organization. But I think it is to really think through what it is that is most important to you in terms of achieving the mission of your agency, your bureau, your office, your whatever it is within your organization. And be very clear in your mind what it is that you're trying to accomplish, what you're doing to accomplish it, and how you fit in. And I think having that ready and having that experience and ability to explain very distinctly what it is that you offer becomes your calling card, if you will, becomes what you can do with the new administration. And you can do that right now without having to do anything more. No new programs, no new money, no new nothing. You just basically understand what you are accomplishing, what you want to accomplish, and be very good at explaining your value moving forward. So,
okay.
My question to you.
Okay.
So forgive me, I don't get access to McKinsey very often, and it's free up here, and see, I can ask him anything. So I'm curious, Eric, great video, by the way. I'm always jealous of you private sector guys because you guys have all the money to do all those cool videos. And I'm looking at your stuff and thinking, obviously you've seen a lot of things around the world. Mm-hmm. If you were to say that there is one thing or one trend or three trends or five, whatever it is, that actually takes your three trends to the next step, which is what are you seeing as something that really works in one of those three that other governments have tried that you think are really quite exciting?
Well, I'll tell you about a theme that I think underlies them, because I really I appreciated your point about how different individual experiences can be. You know, to my mind, I think one of the most interesting things that you see happening in different ways around the world is the way in which governments are motivating their people and drawing out the expertise of the workforce. You know, I would say that kind of in our experience, everywhere you look in the world, there tends to be this kind of untapped well of experience and expertise in the kind of standing civil service. And it can be very difficult for those ideas to come to scale. And so what I think is the most interesting thing around the world is that people are taking different strategies, and I can come to those in a second, but they come to those strategies from the point of view of it's way too expensive for us to kind of always invest outside in coming up with new ideas. It doesn't always reflect our current context. And so how do we take the best information that's out there and motivate people to bring those ideas to scale is, I think, that kind of central question that underlies many of these different themes. I think what people would say is that you need a spark. You know, it's not enough, if you think about it, it's not enough just to have structures and processes in place that allow innovation to occur, and I think those are quite important. We can talk about different ones. But you have to have some catalytic factor, some spark. So, for example, the one-stop shops in Georgia and the like are useful because they provide services in a new way. But they're especially useful if you ask the Georgian government because they required all the people that were delivering those 250 services from different departments to say, you know, tick-tock, 1 month's time, we're going to be standing up here dressed all in green, which, yes, they did use a focus group and some message testing to tell what the right color was, but we're going to be standing up here right in green, and we're going to be facing citizens who are going to say, you know, show me what's different. So that was a forcing mechanism that was pretty different. In Brazil, it was the money. Your money is going to be on the front page of Folha in Sao Paulo, so we better be ready for that. And so I would say the most kind of interesting thing that underlies all of that is the spark that allows the expertise that's already in the workforce to kind of come out and bring those ideas to scale.
I think in this administration, I think the open government program, initiative, whatever you want to call it. Mary, are we calling it an initiative? In OPM, what do you call it? Openness. I think for me was really that spark. Because I think if you look at what we oftentimes talk about as the success of open government, we pull out certain examples, and one of them is Blue Button. I don't know if anybody has heard of Blue Button. Yes. Obviously, VA. Okay. But it underscores your point. Open government, obviously on the first day, for those of you who don't know, President Obama signed his executive order on open government, directing, and then OMB directing all agencies to come up with an open government plan. And in the VA, what they did in that process was look for innovative ideas of people within the organization, not politicals, not new people, but people who had been within the organization and hadn't necessarily been heard or listened to. And they found one. Somebody had the idea, and forgive me, I don't remember his name, that we should start releasing data, or the VA members' data, so that they could have access to their medical record. And then when they have access to their medical record, they can take that to their doctor, they can share it with a loved one, they can basically be more informed and more in control of their medical decisions. And as a result of that idea, the VA took that and built what's called Blue Button, where you can go onto a site and actually press the proverbial blue button, and you can download your personal health care record. That record has now been downloaded by about 1 million VA members. And actually, in addition, people are creating applications where that Blue Button data is being built into Aetna or Walgreens or other care providers. And so what started as an idea that was actually dormant within the organization and really given a little bit of lift by this particular administration has really grown into a worldwide movement. And now we have green button in energy. We have gold button in education. We have, I'm sorry, gold button is coming up in financial. In education, I think they've got a rainbow. It's just an amazing thing to see one idea that somebody had just be recognized and really grow into a movement. And I think we are always looking for those ideas, not because we want to take credit for those ideas, but those ideas are actually being generated by the people who do the delivery every day. They create products, they deliver the services, they're manning the processes. And what we found in the Obama administration, but certainly in my work in San Francisco, the same thing, tapping into those sources of ideas, maybe the people in this room, are really where the groundswell of innovation comes from.
So let's stay on this for a second. So let's say you're a person here in this room and you have a new idea, and it doesn't already have a color on one of the buttons. Mm-hmm. And you want to bring this idea out, throughout your agency and to others in the government. Mm-hmm. What do you do? How do you get that out there?
Well, there are a couple ways. One is again, in this administration, we have developed, and it depends on the agency and by title, but a person who is a lead for innovation for agencies. And those agencies, like HHS, have developed rather large, very thoughtful processes for hearing those ideas and sharing them and approving them for actual implementation and budget within an agency. But I think the first answer to that is really finding that person within the agency, or finding people who know that person, or finding people who work within that group within that agency, to really throw out your idea and let them know about it, and then let kind of the process work through it. I think the other thing that we're about to launch, and I hope I'm not getting ahead of the White House on this, but the other thing is that's aimed at political folks, political leaders who came in with administration. We've recognized that obviously that's wholly inadequate, and we're developing a similar type of grassroots networks of civil servants. And an innovation cohort, maybe a better name will come out of this process, but of innovators who are going to stay from administration to administration. And we're developing that network. And we hope that by creating both networks, the political and the civil service, and I don't mean to make that distinction because I think it's an irrelevant distinction, quite honestly, having served on both sides of this. But I think just showing that what we're really about is trying to figure out how to make this a process sustainable and continuing depending on whatever happens in November. So, and actually, Mary, I'm picking on you because you're sitting in the front row. I think the other thing is just through open government, because I think what Mary and I have talked, Mary's the lead for open government at OPM, and what we've talked a lot about is how open government actually started off as one of those things where you had to check the boxes to keep OMB happy, and we all know we need to keep OMB happy. But what's happened, and it's amazing in the year and a half that I've been in Washington, is to watch what started off as something you did because you had to do it, because your boss told you to do it, and it has moved into kind of a core competency of government. It's actually become part of how we do business, this idea of transparency and participation with getting people to participate in government and collaboration amongst government agencies and other organizations. And I think, Mary, would you agree that you've seen that in other agencies besides OPM kind of moving within the organization? And I think if we call success just that, I will be fantastically happy, because we have changed the culture of government to a degree. And I think what I hope I and others can do over the next period of time we have here in Washington is really take that and move it forward and keep it building and growing within government.
So let's talk about the flip side of success. We've talked about things that are working. And one thing that many innovators often say is that failure is not actually the opposite of success. It is another sign that things are working. So tell me about how you think about failure, and tell us about something that you did that failed and what you learned from that.
I've had many failures in my career, many. I'll tell you about one, and then I'll tell you what I learned about it, if that's okay. So I was the CIO for the City and County of San Francisco for about 5 years. Prior to that, I was working for the government, and the new mayor came in, Mayor Gavin Newsom, very young, very energetic, very charismatic person with great new ideas. And he gave his first State of the City address, and I was in the audience, and he made the announcement that we, the city, were going to provide free Wi-Fi for every person in the city. And not only were we going to provide free Wi-Fi, we were going to provide computers for everybody in need. And I was sitting in the audience thinking, oh, the poor person who's going to have to do that. How are they going to do that? That's not possible. And then the next month, it turns out it was me. He called me into his office and said, Chris, I want you to do that. And I looked at him and I said, I don't know how to do that. And he said, figure it out. So I did. I talked to some folks, went around the country, talked to people who were thinking about it, some people who had tried it, and put the package together, and over the next 3 years ended up negotiating what was arguably the best deal in the world for free Wi-Fi. And then it hit the Board of Supervisors, and for various reasons, they voted it down. It was dead. 3 years. Mayor called me up and said, what happened? You kept telling me this thing was under control. You'd had this great deal. What happened? So we had this long discussion, and he said, okay, Chris, you've got 30 days to come up with the next alternative. What do you mean 30 days? It took me 3 years to get to this point. Yep, Chris, you've got 30 days. Okay. So I looked at what had happened over the past 3 years, learned some things that I should have been learning through the process, came up with an alternative plan, presented it to the mayor. Mayor loved it. We went. A year later, economy tanked in San Francisco. That idea went down. I was thinking, 30 days to come up with the next idea. I came up with the next idea, and we moved forward. And what that taught me was, A, failure is not the end of my career. It's not the end of anybody's career, nor is it the end of my learning process. Second, I had to depend on a lot of people to come up with those second and third options. And they were people that I'd worked with, people that I didn't know yet, but you have to be willing to ask a lot of questions, admit that you're dumb in a lot of things, and really work with folks to get them excited in an idea and a concept. And the third is you really have to roll up your sleeves. I mean, again, I didn't know how to do free Wi-Fi. I didn't know about fiber. I didn't know all of these things. But I very quickly had to become an expert. I very quickly had to show that I had the confidence to lead and move. And I think those three things were my big lessons out of that. But I can tell you that I've had some other spectacular failures that were not quite so nice in the end. But I think in all of them, it is the fact that you can fail, if you want to use that word. I don't like that word. You can have a failure, but you can actually survive it and move forward and be much, much stronger as a result of it. And I would argue that had that Wi-Fi deal not happened, had many of the other failures not happened, I would not be able to lead or provide the strategy or direction that I do now, because I would not understand the problems in their entirety and how to provide solutions to them and think 2 or 3 steps ahead of what I'm putting together, knowing that if this happens, then this will happen, and then this will happen. And I wouldn't be able to do that without my failures.
Well, you know, there are a number of things, even if we just think to some of the examples we were discussing today, there are a number of things that governments do to help make failure more possible. Mm-hmm. You know, so for example, you know, the 20% time that people like 3M and then Apple pioneered, where, you know, essentially they create dedicated time where people are not required to work on the things core to their mission, but then are evaluated on how interesting and how, you know, how they've used that time. There certainly are other things. I've seen cases in government where every manager then had a conversation with their employees and said, I'm going to actually tell you about a time that I failed. And it made it okay for then people to have conversations around failure, because the role modeling was so fundamentally important. And when I talk to people, they say, you know, sometimes the structural solutions are too hard to make happen. So what if I start in my own kind of working team, you know, a place where we can have that kind of open conversation? I have to start it, because if I don't start it, certainly the people that are working with me won't. Yep. So I think I'm going to turn to you in a minute for a last word. Okay. I know, I'm getting a little signal here. It's going to turn to yellow, my timer indicates. But before we do that, just a little bit of housekeeping. So we didn't have all the time we wanted to go through lots of examples. Probably good, keeps things moving. But we do have a website up that we developed with Princeton University that just gives examples of innovative things all around the world. It's actually to the point of living in beta. We haven't actually launched this yet. It's called the Innovation Navigator. It's a website. It's free. No logins or anything required, but it's free, open. It's a public repository of innovation examples all around the world that we put together with a team of researchers from Princeton, as well as a number of NGOs. And so we encourage you to go there and look for examples that could be meaningful to you. And we'd be happy. I think a lot of the information is actually already on there, but we can also connect you to the relevant people that, you know, did the stories that are listed there and help make those connections. We'd be happy to do that.
Excuse me, did you talk to me about this? I don't remember you talking to me about this.
How would you like to participate?
I got lots of stories. You willing to let me participate?
We'll be here all the week.
Okay. Okay.
So, thank you all very much. I'm going to turn it to Chris now for a last word, and then we'll move to the next panel. Chris?
Just to finish on this thing about failure, I don't mean to diminish the risk of failure. I mean, we provide services that people's lives depend on. So, I mean, it's blithe, you know, just for us to come up here and talk about this stuff. But I do think that calculated risk is part of our job and something we do every day. And something that I learned from the Silicon Valley partners when I was in San Francisco, and now here, Eric Ries and his Lean Startup, is that you can manage your risk by focusing on what we call minimum viable products, which is you have an idea, you know that it's necessary, you know that there's a hunger for it in the customers, the people you serve. So what you do is you start by developing a product that you know is not necessarily going to be the be-all and end-all, the ultimate solution, but you start with something. And then you start sharing that with the people who have or use your services. And basically, you work iteratively with your customers as your co-creators of your solutions. And that way, not only do you get them to help you design a better mousetrap, but you also get their buy-in. They become much more supportive of you as you move forward. And you can move this solution much faster, and much cheaper and presumably much better. And so I think that if there's a hallmark in my career, it has been always to focus on that, to minimize risk by starting small, but involving the very people that are going to be using my service in order to design a better service and really bring them inside and help me create. And it's really one of your 3 trends anyway, which is the best people don't work for you. The best people, the smartest people don't work for me. They're out there. They're in this audience. They're everywhere. How do you tap into those people to actually help create a better solution? And that's what it's all about. It's being willing to admit that you don't know it, being willing to go out and do the work of finding people that do, and then bringing everybody together and solving solutions.
Well, I'm disappointed that we had a red light and not some fantastic Academy Award music, but it's been a great pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Would be delighted to have your stories, and all of you can contribute stories.
Okay.
Mostly, I would just like a round of applause in the audience here for Chris Vian.
Thank you.
Thank you.